What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Schmovie. This is episode number 366. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by...
I'm bald.
And I'm cool.
Okay, there it is.
But I'm John, and my bald friend is Ron.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. I'm just feeling cool tonight. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, okay.
That's good. I'm glad to see that.
That's good that you're feeling cool.
If you feel cool, it's good because you look cool. So,
oh, these? You know what?
It's paired up.
I could always take these off for the show, but I just wanted, I feel cool because I hung out with some friends a couple nights ago and actually saw a friggin' movie in person with some people. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys. Wait a minute. I think
you look familiar.
You were there, and you were there. Yeah, what happened? Man. Tell the folks what happened a couple nights ago, Ronald.
We saw Knock at the Cabin, which is our first get together screening wise, and it was like 3 years. It feels like more than 3 years actually, but I'd say 3 years.
Because time has become almost like a meaningless concept in the last 3 years. Yes, it's hard to say how long it really feels like.
Yeah.
It's been a while. We can say that.
Quite some time.
Been a while.
The run of the pandemic, pretty much. But yeah, we got to go see a movie together, which was awesome. Sitting in a theater together was something I missed. We saw a ton of movies together prior to the pandemic, and hopefully we get back into that with some sort of regularity. So yeah, we'll be talking about Knock at the Cabin later this episode as like our feature review. And last week, John picked the conversation for his required viewing, so we'll get into that. But first, we wanted to kind of go through a couple bullet points of some news items that have come down since we last recorded. The first of which, I guess, we'll kind of give our quick feelings and takes on the whole James Gunn, Peter Safran, DCU Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, which was announced, which was announced earlier this week. Officially, formally, you can find it on James Gunn's the Twitter video that he has. It's kind of gone the rounds. You can find that there. But I don't know. What are you guys thinking about this this launch, this announcement, this plan for the next, 8 years or something like that? They said of DC.
I'm pretty excited. I think Marvel and DC have an issue with their characters kind of being, man, this thing is going crazy. Kind of their characters being spread all over the place between TV and movies. Marvel also has this problem. People don't talk about this in the Marvel world, but there are characters that should be in the MCU proper that just aren't.
Or haven't been.
And haven't been. Or haven't been. And I don't know if they ever will be until something drastic happens, because these companies, a lot of them have them in perpetuity forever if they keep you.
Perpetuity. Such spitting all over the place.
Perpetuity. And so what that does is that creates some separation. And what DC has finally done is said, hey, these are our characters in another dimension. These are Elseworld characters. These are not a part of the main story, but they are, one-off stories. They may be bizarro versions of characters, but we're going to see these movies being labeled as Elseworld.
Right.
And then we have the Gods and Monsters Chapter 1, which is going to be the James Gunn era. Let's just call it that. Right. And then there's some universe reset movies that we know about. Some ones that James Gunn, I think that people are under the impression that James Gunn was just going to sweep everything away. It's like, screw this movie. But we're finding out that Shazam, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman are actually going to be included, bundled into the universe that's going to be, welcomed and canon.
Yeah, he treated it as like added value to what they have planned, that they have these, as he kept saying, I think just these 4 projects. I think the word he used was inherited, that he feels lucky that he inherited The Flash, Aquaman, etc. That batch of stuff that it's, and he also said they're kind of off in their own little, like Shazam is off in its own little tonal world anyway. And then on the other hand, you have Flashpoint or Flash, which is supposed to sort of be a potential reset anyway. And then Aquaman is kind of off in its own world. So, I don't know. He didn't promise that he's going to keep those things spinning, but he did sort of say it's not as simple as just a total clear the board type thing. But he also can't say much more than he said. I mean, I think that the main thing is there's surprises to come in these movies. And, you said it's the James Gunn era, but I want to say, I don't think I've seen some people out there that are concerned that it seems like it's the James Gunniverse now. And I don't really think that. I think what it is, there are a couple of them, The Authority and whatever, the Creature Commandos. Those seem like James Gunn projects. Those seem like something he maybe has a passion for that he's pushing forward. And that's probably fine with me, because this guy pulled the Guardians, or was one of the people to pull the Guardians out of obscurity and make them into some of my favorite, comic book movie characters. So I trust James Gunn's instincts when it comes to weird little characters he loves. But I think what people should really notice is that he mentioned some really big items, such as the plans for the in-universe Batman. It's taken from a particular batch of stories that people can love or hate, but can definitely say it's a choice, the way the story works, to have a Robin who's kind of like Batman's son and a bit of a hellion that Batman has to deal with. That's a fun conceit. And then his idea to kind of reset Superman and give us a younger Clark Kent, younger Superman, that stuff all sounds good to me. I don't know. There's some TV shows too, Booster Gold, Waller. I mean, there's just a lot of things that if you know the lore and if you've been keeping up with, say, Peacemaker, some of these little tributaries that might turn into other things you'd be interested in. So yeah, I feel like it does feel like it's the James Gunn era, but it doesn't feel like he's only doing the James Gunn thing. And I do expect him to at least mean it when he says it, whether it turns out this way or not, when he says that they're going to let directors have a vision and do their own thing. I think James Gunn is going to be a director friendly executive producer, or whatever his role is going to be on some of these things. Do you have a favorite project maybe from the herd, Ronald or Steve, that stands out to you, something that you're like especially looking forward to now?
The Green Lantern one, the series, stood out to me a lot. I mean, I guess mainly in how he presented it, just this idea of like it being kind of like a mystery that could possibly have a bigger impact on this chapter of the DCU. I think he said he compared it like True Detective kind of style of a series, but with two lanterns, which is kind of a cool take, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I like that idea of trying to like make some of these, and Marvel kind of does it in some form or fashion. Kind of having these series or these movies fit in the world or be in this like grand plan, but also like from one to the other kind of feel different. And whether it's like the one that feels like a caper, or the one that feels like a political thriller, or the one that's like a more gritty mystery, like whatever you could draw the line to in the Marvel movies that kind of really exemplify that. I like the idea of some of the stuff him having announced. It definitely feels like there could be a sense of that as well. And for me, the big takeaway is just the idea that they plan to build up to something. And I think that's kind of what I think most people, or a lot of people that I agree with too, is just like, it seems like the whole DCEU, where they tried to go with it, it just was kind of backwards in terms of like story work and character development, and just kind of spending time with this stuff before you get all these people together. So if they can accomplish that, or some variation or version of that, which Marvel did so well, I think this is like a really good plan, or could be a really good plan. And yeah, I'm a huge Gunn fan. I'm happy that it doesn't seem like it's just gonna be the Gunniverse or whatever, like that some people do seem to be concerned about. It's just kind of like something that him and Safran and this writer's room that they talked about, which had a lot of variety to it and different kind of takes and coming from different parts of the industry. I think it's a good approach, and just kind of is like a fresh take for them, and not kind of having to silo everything off into one thing that, everything kind of gets branched off of. I like that. I think that approach is probably better suited for what they're trying to do. And it's just, a lot of people were happy just to see that there's a lot of focus and emphasis and priority on maybe getting a really good Superman movie out again. So yeah, I think that's exciting too. I mean, it's arguably the biggest character, so they need to do it right.
Ronald, do you have a particular project in the mix that stands out to you as one you're excited about?
Superman Legacy, Lanterns, and Batman.
The Brave and the Bold.
I don't really care about a connectedness as long as it has to do with the quality. If there's a quality in terms of all these things have a standard of quality now, I'm good with that. And if maybe 2 or 3 of them lead to a bigger thing, that'd be cool too. But I think what I've always wanted, which I was really afraid of with a lot of this stuff, is like, is this stuff going to be good? Is it going to hold up? Is it things that we can share with people that we won't feel like, oh, I like that, and then everybody else is like, that was poop. You know what I mean? Like, we want more consistency. So like, yeah, I agree with Steve. I if it leads to something beautiful and big, that'd be cool. But if it doesn't, that's cool too. But also, consistency seems to be the thing that he's aiming for. That's the thing, kind of the undertone of what he was promising. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm super excited, actually. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Well, I'm super excited too, because the project I'm probably most excited about that he announced is the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow movie,
that sounds so
which
cool.
The series that's based on, written by Tom King, and I hope I'm getting this name correct. The artist's name is Bilquis Evely. Bilquis Evely, Bilquis Evely. And the art is, honestly, I mean, the art was the reason to pick up the book. You know how you see a comic book with a cool cover and you flip it, and the art on the inside is often not as good.
Yeah.
And you go,
that
oh, well,
happens a lot.
maybe that was well written. I'll wait until I hear more. But when it's one that, like, the cover looks cool and then you open it and it's the same art as the cover, basically the same quality throughout. And the story was very much like Supergirl is this little bit more of like a warrior character than Superman, but she's got the same thing of trying to do what's right. And it's kind of like a space, it's got like an epic kind of Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever you want to call it, planet hopping kind of backdrop. So that's the one I'm probably the most excited about if they're actually adapting this comic, because this comic, when I was reading it, was like, oh, this would be a great way to get into the Supergirl character. But I think they talk about building up. To get to something this cosmic, they would need to build up a little bit. So yeah, I'm hoping they do the same thing you said, Ronald. Good projects, but like, let it grow towards something. I think that's interesting to note that James Gunn can learn from what Marvel did, whereas Marvel learned from the mistakes of the past, of all these attempts to do comic book movies without doing them in a comic booky way that was interconnected. Now James Gunn can look at 20 Marvel movies and say, okay, what has worked for Marvel and what hasn't, and how can we plan? I mean, he's got the insider's take on how things worked or didn't work at Marvel. So I do think that's one reason to be hopeful that at least within the plan, there's probably a combination of exciting, distinct projects that are their own thing, and then like making sure that if they do piece together into something, that it's actually, that's actually something too. If you make a good project and it's a piece of a bigger puzzle, I'm with you, Ronald. It doesn't have to be screaming that it's a piece of a puzzle the whole time. It can just be that you later realize, oh, I got some important information from that cool cartoon or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so those are all fun projects to look forward to. Cool. I also thought the Waller series sounded really cool. I think that's going to be the sort of follow-up to Peacemaker that we're looking for. So anyway, the other news I just kind of wanted to broach. Ronald, are you back on the Moviepass tip the way that Steve and I are? Did you sign up?
I'm going to. I think I've been a little scared. Okay, I guess lightning round. How do you feel inside about this? And have you used it yet?
Well, I haven't got my card yet, but
Okay.
I think it's going to be, it's basically going to be 3 movies for the price of 1. If I sneak off and see matinees, or if I manage to, depending on which theaters it covers, to me, it's going to be like 3 movies for the price of 1. So that's how I did the math. It's like $10 a month, and sounds like I'll get credits for about 3 movies. And otherwise, it sounds like it's the same plan as last time, if not maybe a little bit less mystery. They make it sound like they're going to try to get every theater in the universe to cooperate. So if that's actually true, then yeah, it will pay for itself with me if I keep up my current habits. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, that's the plan. I think initially I signed up for the basic, and then I think I upgraded it to the standard because I was one of the backers on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I got an email after signing up that if you were a backer, you got 2 months of $20 in credits. So like that's that second plan, which I think equates to like 6 or 7 movies. But I don't, I'll try this out, for a couple of months and see how it goes. You can cancel at any time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem a little more streamlined, instead of saying, go all out if you want to. It's more, it's a credit based system. So like the plan that like John was talking about is like 34 credits a month for $10. And depending on when you go, where you go, what movie you're seeing, you could get up to 3 movies in that month, with those credits. They also allow credits to roll over from month to month, up to the amount that you get monthly. So, you can accumulate a rollover of, in his case, 34 points, and carry that with you from month to month. But I don't know. It definitely seems more transparent. I mean, from what they say and claim, and listening to the CEO on some podcasts recently, the idea is that it's not even really a matter of getting theaters to buy in or allow it, because it's still the same model in terms of you having a prepaid debit card in essence, that you can use to do this, and it's kind of all tied to the credits that you have on your account. But yeah, I mean, once we get the cards, I haven't gotten mine. It's supposed to come in the next couple of days. Give it a run, and we can we can come back and say how well it worked or didn't work. But I think this is the kind of flexibility that Moviepass offered. Is just the idea. As much as I love the AMC A list, and I think it's still a great value if that is something that is accessible to you. Something that's $10 a month, and I can have a little more move around from different theaters, or if I want to go see something at a theater that's a little more artsy or independent that maybe AMC's not playing, that's kind of where Moviepass really comes in, and that's really kind of where they really helped lift a lot of movies and theaters and just some box office when they did have their nice run that glorious summer. Helping movies that needed that kind of boost for people that were going multiple times a week. But I don't know. I hope there's a space for it. I mean, obviously the exhibitors kind of pivoted and made a lot of them have their own versions of a plan like this. Right. But that crossing is what Moviepass offers, to kind of go from theater to theater. And yeah, I just like the idea of it. It's kind of stipend out now. You have these credits, and what's that say?
I just signed up.
Okay, there you go.
It's a little blur. I just signed up as you guys are talking.
So
the Moviepass brothers.
It's just we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think the idea that it's a little more controlled,
right,
is really going to benefit them. And they have a really interesting way of presenting this to theaters too, to embrace and not fight, like they did before, because it does really present a possible winning scenario for especially for independent theaters. And independent films that really could benefit from the box office influx that a Moviepass subscription, can offer. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I mean, again, we'll get the card in a couple of days, and maybe in the next episode or two, we can kind of follow up and see how it's going.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Do you think if we all three get our cards and then we get together and we touch our cards together, that it's going to increase our power in some way? We'll all start.
It's like a super card. Yeah. Then you can get concessions with it and stuff. Yeah.
Super card.
So if one last question, if you have one card, but have a significant other, can you use that one card for 2 tickets?
No,
it's just always.
So. Yeah.
I can't remember what there was that question on the FAQ. I think it's actually, I take that back. Maybe not, because I think it did say something about it may not be limited to one a day. So you could just, possibly, maybe you can actually, I think because of the credits, you can have just a quantity of 2 and it still just ticks off the credits. Right. I don't know. It's a good question.
There was a way to cheat it before.
Yeah,
because every time you logged, and I don't mean it was good to cheat it, but if you logged in, it gave you the value of, I forget how it was that I ended up discovering that one time, but it was you still had that money on the card. Essentially you could go buy a drink if it was I can't remember what happened though. It's that they unlocked $16 or something. And on bargain matinee day, the ticket was $7, and so I could still use it. But I think people were saying they could buy a second ticket on those days, and I don't remember if I ever tried to cheat it in that way. I was not trying to bilk the system. I thought it was a beautiful system. It was cheap, and I saw so many movies when that card when that was up and running. I really got my money's worth out of Moviepass. That's why I'm okay with doing this new model, which you said, Steve. It's just more sane. It's more controlled. It's more. Yeah. It sounds less pie in the sky than what they were offering before. So. And I'm at this point I do nip off and see a movie pretty regularly. So it's gonna pay for itself for me. So cool. We shall see. Shall we conversate, as people say? It always bothered me when people would say that, because that's not the darn word. Converse is the word. But shall we converse about The Conversation from 1974, my friends?
Yes.
Do it.
Required viewing. Okay, now this is a movie that this is a movie that I love, and this is a movie that I've reliably had it in that rotating cast of movies that when people say, what are your favorite movies? This is frequently in the top 3 or something. You know, I just think this is I love the look and feel of it. There's like a nostalgia feel for me of like, even when it was being made, it was meant to kind of call up like European films of the 60s. Coppola was kind of, like inspired by that stuff and wanted to make a little bit more of an artistic film than you normally see in America. And watching this movie again and really thinking about how it's made and just where it falls in his career and just where it falls in the pantheon of films that people talk about, I really don't think there are that many other movies that look or feel like this movie, or that, at least not American movies, at least not of the 70s and beyond. I just think it's an interesting success story of a kind of one for them and one for me sort of thing, that after he did The Godfather, and then before he did Godfather 2, he went off and made this. And he didn't even finish shooting the script that he wrote for it because he was so busy with Godfather 2. So Walter Murch sort of took control in the post-production. And like, there were 20 pages of script that didn't get filmed. Coppola didn't know they had the movie. And Walter Murch is the one who kind of made the movie out of what they had. And I actually want to talk to you guys in a little bit about some of that stuff. That's interesting to note how that was done. But just briefly, if you don't know this movie, it's about a surveillance expert who gets hired to do a job that basically the conversation of the title is a conversation that's recorded at the beginning of the movie that then has ramifications for this surveillance expert and for the people being recorded and for the person who paid him to record it. It's this moral dilemma of like, meddling in people's lives. And Gene Hackman plays this empty shell of a man, Harry Caul, who's so obsessed with protecting his secrets and protecting himself that he seems to have no real human connections at all and maybe limited humanity. But I think Gene Hackman is electric in this movie. I just love it. What do you think of the conversation, Ronald? You were the only one of us who hadn't seen it at all.
Not really my bag, but
yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that first scene. It's like masterful filmmaking. It didn't keep me. I don't know why it didn't keep me engaged the whole movie, but the first scene was so perfect that I was kind of like, is the whole thing going to be this? Like, it just does a lot of things at the same time. It's just like, it's kind of setting the tone for how meticulous this man is.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of going through all these shots and dipping through this park. The audio stuff that's happening where like, he's trying to hear parts of the conversation. It's just unreal. Like, I've never seen anything like it. But yeah, I don't know, like something about it toward the end. I just like, some of it is context, man. Like, I kind of wish that I saw this before I had a phone, like a smartphone or something. It's just like these things, sometimes the context that they have, and maybe this may have something to do with my pick that I wound up telling you guys after this. That the context is everything. And sometimes just like, if I saw this when I was younger, I would have processed it totally differently.
Sure.
But the character study of the man who is obsessed with this, his profession and the coldness that he has about things, and the human interactions that he has that are so strange.
Yes.
It's just like very basic questions being asked to him, and he just kind of crumbles in a weird way.
The only scene where he kind of opens up, Ronald, and warms up is that scene at the party at the back of his shop, where he warms up because he's kind of getting buttered up and telling these stories. And then the guy kind of pulls the little trick on him by revealing he's been recording him. And then he shuts back down again. But there's a brief moment where he actually starts bragging and boasting. And he actually tells that awful, the joke with the awful slur in it, which I guess we found out that Francis Ford Coppola movies have to have one egregious slur in them. I do think like you see that and you go, well, you're not supposed to like these people. These aren't supposed to be pleasant guys. But it does make me think if you were doing that more deliberately, you would not choose that for. You would say, let's show that he's not pleasant, but not a guy who you go, But what's sort of sad about that, I actually found the script online and I looked in the script and I couldn't find that joke in the script. So that leads me to believe that may have been like an ad lib.
No,
or something someone
no.
threw out on the day, which makes me feel even worse about it. The sort of homophobia of that joke. However, it was meant to make him seem like a guy who's trying to appeal to these kind of sleazeballs. But you're right, Ronald. That's the only part of the movie where he kind of warms up and he instantly regrets letting his guard down. And his whole relationship with Terry Garr is so crazy. You know, like you can tell that she's had it. Like she seems like she's a sucker, and then as he's leaving, she's like, you know what? Don't come back. You know, and you realize that she was being friendly because she's got this screwed up boyfriend that she's kind of trying to communicate with, but she's fine with cutting him off. I found all of that really, you're right. The character study. Well, I mean, honestly, Ronald, the character study is the movie, but I do think there's, if I think there's something about at least the context of this movie. People have been referring to this movie and ripping this movie off with like the way they treat this kind of stuff. You know, a lot of people have been influenced by this movie. So there, it is that kind of thing of, it's not so much like the age at which you see it, but maybe like before you see other pop culture that is kind of pulling from it. But as far as me, like every time I watch it, there's something I noticed that I never noticed before, and there's something that pulls me deeper in. What do you think of the conversation, Steve?
I mean, it's kind of, I guess I'm kind of in the middle of the two of you. Like, I don't know. I feel like it definitely is something I like respect immensely. And, you know, I think it's probably Gene Hackman's best performance that I can kind of think of. But I think really kind of the bigger takeaway of the movie for me when I saw it before and even on the rewatch, it's just kind of beyond his performance. It's just the like the world in which he lives is so paranoid and private and kind of stripped of everything.
Yeah.
That like the situation that comes out of this job that they take, it's just it's kind of the craziness of this created madness in a world that like is absent of anything else. You know, that he kind of sort of is creating on one hand by himself, with like kind of how deeply he goes into this recording and, you know, what he thinks is happening and, you know, versus what is actually happening. But I don't know. I feel like that kind of like push and pull throughout the whole movie of like this person who, you know, is kind of like burdened or kind of burned or, you know, broken by this bad incident that happened based off of this, you know, recording that he made in the past.
Right.
Where people were murdered.
Yeah, a family was murdered.
Three people were murdered. And I mean, and that, what that does to you, and then to kind of be in a situation again where, you know, he's kind of so paranoid about what's being done with these recordings or like what these recordings could, an outcome from them of any sort, you know. And then when you start to get these feelings about it and like the people that he's working with and the director and even Harrison Ford's character, and it's just like, it always stood out to me just like how there was such an effort for this character to be so private and so removed from all that, even though he's so intrusive by career or by profession. That like, I don't even know what that right word is. That like
dichotomy or pushing
dichotomy,
or like, hypocrisy.
Yeah. Like how at odds that was with like his life. And then ultimately the impact that it has on his life when, you know, he's kind of wrong about, you know, what he's thinking is going on in a lot of ways. I don't know, that was always the big takeaway for me. I mean, beyond just like a great performance by Gene Hackman, it's always, and again, it's like I always forget that Harrison Ford's in it every, you know, the times I've seen it.
I'm wishing we got this was before Harrison Ford was Harrison Ford. You know, I think he has another much smaller role in Apocalypse Now. And then he became Han Solo, and then he became Indiana Jones, and then later, you know, he's Jack Ryan. But like there's a thing with him where I kind of wish we'd gotten more young, creepy Harrison Ford. I think he's deliciously creepy in this,
good.
like
he's
hanging
good.
out in the sweater and like making the cookies. And there's like a little hint of a relationship between him and Robert Duvall where he's like that scheming underling who's like, we later find is doing something much more nefarious than what we think. But in that scene where it's just a little subtle line where like, they're back at the apartment playing the recording, and Harrison Ford's character Martin says, "Shall I play it again?" And Robert Duvall says, "No," or something. There's something about like Robert Duvall saying, "You want it to be true. You just want me to know it to be true." And then you know Harrison Ford is like, "No, I just want to make sure you understand the full." It's like we totally see later that he's maneuvering Robert Duvall into a place where he'll go and confront them, where they will then murder him, and then that's like. But you're right. It's like it's funny that Gene Hackman's paranoia is wrong, but it's like what's actually happening is really horrible too.
Yeah.
And the actual scene, when you see little glimpses of like his evolving visions of what's happening that change as he learns more about the recording and as he listens to the recording, and as you said, Ronald, the remixing it and getting new context from different mics. And there's one little line reading, and I heard somewhere that Brian De Palma actually told Coppola this was a cheat, but Coppola said no, it's all about the mind state of the character. But the difference between Frederick Forrest's character, Mark, he's the guy who is on the recording, and one of the young lovers, I guess. The difference between just the subtle emphasis, and it's even much subtler than what I'm about to say, but throughout the movie, you hear it as, he'd kill us if he had the chance. And then at the end, what he says is, he'd kill us if he had the chance.
Yeah.
And like Gene Hackman has been hearing it the first way, the whole movie. And then at the end, he hears that what he's saying is, we're killing him before he kills us. Whereas earlier, it sounds like they're saying we're afraid of him, and that's where he goes with it. And it's the compassion he feels for Cindy Williams's character, which what a coincidence that I was watching this movie the week that she died. That was definitely making me notice her. And she's great in this. I love how that recording, I love listening to it and hearing it. It does evolve. And her thing with, oh, poor baby or poor guy about she sees a guy sleeping on a bench and says, I've always thought this is sad because he's somebody's baby boy. You hear that line enough. You hear her singing, the red, red robin goes bob, bob, bobbing along. Like that stuff becomes so eerie. And Ronald, what you're talking about, the distortion, the weird little electrical noise as he's switching from different things, like that stuff, just the sound design of that is so powerful and so creepy. Honestly, you have this beautiful melodic piano piece that's like the main piece of the score by David Shire, but then it's mixed in with these like mechanical kind of scream sounds and stuff that really are kind of horrifying. The one thing, Ronald, I wanted to mention to you about the ending too, is that this is where the idea about them piecing it together in the edit. In the original version, there's this whole piece where he has the party at his shop. He wakes up in the morning, Meredith is gone, but she hasn't stolen anything. She's just rummaged through some stuff. Then he goes and confronts his partner, what's his name? Stanley, I think is his name, in the park, and says to him, that guy you brought over last night, his girl like came through and messed up my stuff, but she looked, but she didn't find anything because I have the important stuff locked away. And Stanley's like with his mother and they're at a concert in the park, and he kind of blows him off. And then he goes to see the Robert Duvall character, and it's a little bit of a longer scene. And then he goes to the confessional, which in the movie, the confessional scene is much earlier.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the hotel. And then he goes to the financial plaza and gets thrown out by security. And then he sees Anne on the elevator on his way down and follows her on the bus. And so that whole scene of her in the park, remember when he had like the dream of her in the fog in the park and Gene Hackman's like shouting all that stuff at her? In the original script, that was an actual scene where he talks to her on the train and like harasses her and she's like running from him. And he says all that stuff to her, like trying to communicate with her because he says all this stuff about how I care for you. And he knows he says, I feel the same way when I see a homeless person, and all this stuff that's creepy. She's like, who are you? And she runs from him. And then, so then later anyway, when he realizes what's going on and he goes and sees her, like, remember they're in the building and she kind of nods to the guy and he looks and they see him there. Like that part plays differently in the original script because it's all about them being like, that guy who harassed me on the bus, he's here now, And then later when he calls him and says, and they replay the recording, they just, that part is creepy to me. It's in the movie where he's on the phone and they play on the phone a recording of what he was just doing, him playing sax in his house, so that's really scary. But I'm just saying all of that storyline, it was a little bit more linear. It's interesting to note in the movie that the way they worked that edit, it almost doesn't, it's like almost like a dreamlike section. It's like you can't really tell what's going on. In the movie, those scenes, it's amazing how when you watch it through, it just feels like it's part of the movie. But if you go back to that part of the movie now where he goes to the building, he sees her in the car, then he sees the newspaper, then he's back at the building and she's coming out of the building, that stuff feels very dreamlike now because they did not have the scenes. Like I said, there were supposedly like 20 pages of stuff that didn't get shot. So I don't know if that would have helped you with the last act of the story clicking more, but I think ultimately it makes the movie more interesting that it's more about like the paranoid mind state is much more like what comes across. But anyway, I guess to me, it's just one of those movies that constantly kind of reveals something different. And I think people have stolen that ending scene of him tearing the apartment apart, to look for the bug. I feel like I've seen countless like references to that, or some idea that's based on that, of just like the person who totally loses it and then ends up demolishing everything looking for something in a paranoid act like that. So
yeah. Cool.
I don't know. He'd kill us if he had the chance, Ronald.
Kill us if they had the chance. Oh, so it's my pick, right?
Yes, I guess it's true. Your pick is next.
All right. Before Blair Witch, before all of the found footage horror films, there was a BBC 1992 horror film. Well, this is strange because it was presented like a BBC story.
Yeah.
So it scared the living shit out of people in London because people thought it was real. It used real correspondence from the BBC at the time, which had never happened. So it legitimized it in a way that was kind of nuts. It was the like War of the Worlds of that time. It's like it created a real stir over there, and that is 1992's GhostWatch. I've never seen it. I've heard so many good things about it. And I'd like us to see it.
Yeah.
Have you seen it, Steve?
No, I have not.
I have.
Yeah.
And I saw it only recently. Like it was coming up on a lot of lists back in Halloween time.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. Who posted a filmmaker that we all really like? It might have been Edgar Wright.
Yeah.
Someone right around the Halloween season, like was going on a like a rant about it on Twitter, and I had heard about it a few times, but that was kind of what put it over for me to kind of track it down and find it.
I never watched it because all of them were like VHS versions for a really long time. They were like
it came out like a good version recently, right?
Yeah, really recently. So like for like 20 years or so, there were all these like VHS copies that people had recorded from TV, and then there was like a DVD that came out, but then really recently a Blu-ray came out. I think it was maybe Vinegar Syndrome or somebody like that, a British small label remastered it and put it out. But it was like for a really long time VHS quality. But that's why I waited so long. I waited quite a long time to see it. So GhostWatch is my pick.
GhostWatch, that's cool. It's on my nebulous list of gotta watch that at some point, but I don't know why I never have. So
if you want to watch it with us, it's actually on Tubi. If you've ever used Tubi before,
cool.
It's free on there, and it's only like I think a couple bucks on Vudu or Amazon Prime. It's like $2 or $3, but
cool.
No, it's good. I'm excited to watch that again. I haven't. I mean, I watched it again. It was right around Halloween, but
cool.
Maybe I'll track down that good version that you're talking about.
Oh, you watched?
Because the one I watched was not like a premium version of it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was fine for my expectations, but I mean the quality at least was fine. Cool. Yeah, that'll be fun next week.
Cool.
Does anybody wear a weird translucent gray raincoat throughout the entire movie? Steve?
I don't know.
I was just that's one thing about the conversation I meant to comment on, is that strange jacket that Gene Hackman is wearing the entire time.
That he also wears in Enemy of the State,
which is a definite follow-up. I mean, it's like it's not meant to be Harry Caul, but it is meant to make us think it's basically Harry Caul from
and I was reading an article in going into this conversation about the conversation was that the picture of him from the NSA in Enemy of the State is a picture of his character from the conversation.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like crazy. Yeah. It's like,
I mean, when it was announced, it was sort of like, wait, is this? I mean, that's definitely where that casting came from, and I'm sure if they could have used the name, they probabed would have. I don't know why. For sure. They couldn't if they wanted to, but I mean, I do think it's interesting that it's basically it's a very amped up version of what that guy might be doing a few years later, 20 years later, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's fun.
When did Enemy of the State come out? It was shot around here, right?
Yep. Baltimore and DC.
Oh, wow.
Enemy of the State, 98.
98. Okay, so 24 years after the conversation, they did a sort of de facto sequel.
Tony Scott.
Oh, that's right. I knew it was somebody, but I'd forgotten that it was him.
Just trying to see what the filming locations were. Cool. All right. Well, moving on. Again, we talked about it at the top. Finally got to go see a movie together again. John had his icy, Ronald had his bottle of water, and
I choked on that water.
myself. I thought you were dying or that you were very ill, and I was like, oh, either situation is
Fucking
not
choke.
good. I was like, shit, he's about to. I was looking over. You're like, are you all right?
Oh, is that what that noise was?
Yeah.
It
It was like a gag and a gasp for air.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was part of the sound design of Knock at the Cabin, so I didn't turn my head.
I think I tilted. I was like sitting back too far to drink the quantity that I was. So it was so cold. I kind of jerked a little bit, and it
went down the wrong pipe, is what we say.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to go see Knock at the Cabin at a special advanced screening in a nice theater with nice seats and nice sound, and it was just a nice experience all around for me, at least. I think you guys will agree. But yeah, this is a new movie, co-written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Got Dave Bautista, Jonathan Groff, Rupert Grint, Ben Aldridge. What's the little girl's name? Kristen. Is it Qui?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. The names, yeah, Bautista, Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley, and Jonathan Groff are the kind of people you might recognize at least. But yeah, this is just a kind of thriller, possible end of the world, paranoia, maybe cult activity. You don't really know until we kind of get into this movie. John's mentioned it. I think Ronald even too. It's based on a novel called was it Cabin at the End of the World?
Yes.
Yeah.
By
Paul Tremblay, right. You've probably mentioned it more on this podcast than any of the film's marketing mentioned.
Even the movie kind of snuck it up there
yeah.
quick, but I will say that all the credits were a little quick at the like. I noticed that the one after that said who wrote the movie was also quick. So it's like, okay, they did it about the same amount of time, but I still feel like it's a weird thing. And I wonder if, and here's my kindest version of this. I wonder if M. Night doesn't want people seeing, oh, it's based on a book. He doesn't want the marketing to be pushing people to read the book and ruin his movie because he's so surprise obsessed and secrecy obsessed. I wonder if he wants people to find out about the book after the movie rather than like let all the marketing push people to go read the book so that then they're watching the movie all spoiled, which again, that's like what happens with a book. But I wonder if that's like an M. Night thing that like it was kept a little bit quiet because I don't think there was a poster or anything. No. It's just an interesting thing to note. I don't know quite how that works. The only reason that seems weird to me, and I may have mentioned this on the show, is that it seems like if you were an author and your book got turned into an M. Night movie, you'd be thinking like, oh, at least my name, oh, this is going to be awesome for me. And I'm sure it still will be for an author to get, adapted that way. I'm sure you get paid and all that. It's interesting to think that they're not trying to make a name out of the author who more or less wrote this movie. I mean, the last act is very different. But up until that, the book and the movie are very, very similar. And I think, Ronald, did you do the audiobook or did you read the?
I did the audiobook. I've been into that because I'm driving.
Who read it?
Commute. A woman read it.
A woman?
No, but the reason I say that is this is going to sound really weird. Despite the fact that there was one person doing all the voices, she really did a good job with the couple.
Mm-hmm.
I actually when I wound up watching the movie, I'm like, oh man, this is how I imagine them sounding because she kind of had these specific ideas for the two people,
dads.
two dads in the story, and
Andrew and Eric,
Daddy Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy Andrew and Daddy Eric.
Eric, the uptight, vaguely Christian one, and Andrew, the more fun, more like curious and playful, but also possibly more like angry or just whatever. Like you feel like there's a balancing act between these two dads. But I thought it was a really nice. That was one thing the movie nailed was the family vibe between the actors and they did feel like they were jumping off the page to me in that sense. Like in the beginning of the movie, I did feel like, oh, this is so close. Like M. Night really picked up on something in the book that he liked, specifically about the family, I think. And about the other characters. When Dave Bautista comes in, all that stuff. It was interesting having read the book so freshly before, because I think in some ways the movie would have been more exciting had I not read the book. because it is such a slow burn in some ways. But I also think I was glad that I had the book in my head when it got into that last act, because it was kind of as fun to compare it to the book as it was to watch it, in my opinion. But I like seeing something self-contained, and I think it's interesting that when you mentioned it as a thriller, Steve, this could have, if this had followed the book exactly, it would have been a little bit more horror, because it would have had more kind of gruesome, like true gore in it, and it would have had a couple of moments that are very upsetting compared to what happens in the movie that already has some upsetting parts in it. But I feel like this movie steered clear of showing us too much of the gore. Like, it was very like chaste almost in terms of turning the camera away from the really worst stuff. And then the way that it wrapped up was a kind of neat and tidy ending that gives a little hope to the story, or at least some indication of where hope might lie. That I was like, oh, it's interesting to see a movie. Still, I like when I go see a movie that feels like it's not trying to set anything else up, and it's not a universe, not a mythology. It kind of does all that it's doing in that one movie, and it is a different beast. It could have been more horror. It is much more of a thriller, and the slow burn kind of almost like examining this family, or these two families in a sense. There's a group of 4 people that come in that aren't a family, but they are bound together by something. Yeah. How did you feel, Ronald, watching this, having read the book? Do you think it helped or hurt your viewing of the movie, having the book fresh in your head?
I think it helped. I thought it was a strong story anyway. I mean, just the concept. I remember, when I was telling somebody the premise, and like, oh, first they're like, "It's an M. Night Shyamalan book." What I mean, M. Night Shyamalan movie. What's it about? And then I told the premise, and their face immediately was just like, oh man, that's fucking,
yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to see that, but it plays out so well. I thought that it was a good companion piece, and I implore anybody that's seen the movie to read the book. Like, it's an experience. It really is an experience. And there's a lot of like heavy lifting that the book does in terms of the backstories of the characters that's kind of brushed over in the movie in a really cool way. They kind of hit on all the cool stuff, all the important things, but it's worth a read. But I enjoyed it overall. The third act change I really liked, because I didn't like the ending of the book. So to have it end the way that it did, which was, equally as somber, but it did have some light at the end of the tunnel, and I really enjoyed that, especially coming fresh off of watching The Last of Us.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I think when you're writing a bit more of a genre book, and it's a little bit, like I said, more violent and a little bit more in the horror genre, it makes sense to me to have the events of the book. Like, I like the ending of the book better for the book, but I'm still not sure I think I like the ending of the movie better for the movie. I think that if the movie had followed the book, there's one thing that happens in the book that would have made it legendary and possibly extremely off-putting. To horror fans and fans of extreme storytelling, it would have made it, oh my God, I can't believe they went there. And then to the average viewer that M. Night is still trying to grab, it would have made it maybe too much. And I can think of a handful of movies that have pushed that lever of like, how far can you push certain things that the audience doesn't want to see happen in a horror book? Like, you're reading a book and it's like there's 40 pages of book left after that event. The movie was structured so that I think here's what it is. There's certain things that don't matter. You can't imagine certain things mattering to certain characters after that event. In the book, there's a lot more, you said, heavy lifting in the narration that can explain the mindset of the characters and explain how they move on after something truly heinous happens. In the movie, I think it would have felt like, well, what's this all about then? If that's going to happen. And I don't want to be any more. I mean, I guess we could do a spoiler section on this, but we don't have to. People can figure it out. But I think that it was wise to make that choice for the movie, just because M. Night is a little bit more populist, and I think he could truly do something that's like a hard R with like lots of violence in it, but I don't know that that's really his way. He's much more about the elegant camera move and the staging things in a way that keeps you guessing. And I think you mentioned this, Ronald, after we saw it, that first half hour or so of the movie is just exquisite. Like the crafted, the suspense, the timing, the pacing, the what's going on. Like, if you don't know the book and you're watching this movie, you might be shocked at how quickly it moves to get the premise in action. Then it slows down a little bit for some of the really grueling stuff, but that first chunk of the movie is just really, I think, dynamic and interesting. And it's like truly thrilling more than it is scary. There's a few moments that are genuinely scary, but then it's much more like just the suspense that's wearing on you. Steve, I mean, you don't know the book, you just know the movie, but
yeah.
you know M. Night, and we've come back to him throughout his career to kind of check in on what he's up to. How do you feel about this?
I loved it, honestly. Like, I thought the movie was great, and I was like, when you're talking, Ronald, about like explaining the plot to people, like I was telling Erin had an idea like about what it was, like just from the trailer, and she saw what when I watched it, but like kind of explaining it to her a little more on Wednesday morning before I left for work, I was like, I found myself getting like excited telling her about it, and I feel like that's always a good, that's a good like takeaway from
it's a schoolyard feeling
experience of like seeing a movie that you know you liked, but you're like, how much did I like it? And sitting on it a little more to talk about it tonight, like I kind of looked back yesterday morning and was like, yeah, man, I was like really excited to like kind of not spoil anything for her, but like kind of get a little deeper into like the real dilemma of the movie, you know, having seen it. And and I think the performances in the movie are great. I think Bautista, we always talk about him, and it's out there that, like, this is a role he really went after, and M. Night went after him after seeing him in what would he see? Oh, Blade Runner 2049. And I think he's incredible in this movie. This is definitely like, this is a calling card for him of what he intends to do as an actor. And I thought he's like that opening sequence John mentioned. I think it's just, that whole sequence is just, I think, incredible. Like these awkward close-ups between his character Leonard and the little girl When. And I just think that, as he kind of gets closer and closer to those faces in that scene, and the angles start to tilt a little more to kind of throw off how we feel about the situation, as we start to see more and more about where he's going with his questioning. That whole scene is great. But yeah, the family works very well. I think M. Night has a real gift for working with children. We talked about this after our screening. It was a real takeaway for me. The young girl who plays Wen is just incredible, and she really does kind of fall into this family dynamic with Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge's characters. And they themselves, the two of them, I think, are just like a great couple, a great family in this movie. Yeah. There's some flashback sequences that kind of give us a little more framework for their relationship. Both really positive moments in their relationship, and both really, kind of negative or challenging parts of their relationship that I think really kind of build a base for us to really kind of believe them as a couple, and as them as fathers, and just how much they care about each other and about their child. So I think that all really makes everything that they're faced with in the movie be as effective as it is, at least, in my feeling, in terms of their performances and kind of where the movie goes. I think the other really great work in the movie is the ability to really slowly and deliberately like have an audience really start to notice these very small fissures in their relationship in this moment, or in their being on the same page about what's happening. I think there's a couple of sequences in the movie where John kind of mentioned kind of the ways in which they're different, and their whole thing that you see in some of these moments is they have this like always together mentality. It's always us, and that's a really inspiring thing. And then you see them in this really traumatic, scary moment, and one that a child is involved in as well. And these things start happening that really put a bit of a divide between them, and it's so subtle and it's so deliberate that it just it really kind of, it just worked for me a lot. And there was not really a piece where like you think that their relationship or their love for one another is in question at any time in the story, which I think is a great thing for the story, because there's no point in even going into that, I think, in this story. And the fact that it was never even broached is like, I just think it makes their whole like dilemma work so much better. But yeah, I thought this movie was great. The more it sits with me, the more positive I feel about it. I think we were talking a lot about it after we saw the movie, but just this idea that like, kind of this run that M. Night is on, like whether you liked the last 4 movies or whatever that he's put 4 or 5 movies that he's put out, but kind of since he's kind of come back, quote unquote, I guess post After Earth, slowly getting into our good graces again. I guess most notably like with Split, but even going back to The Visit and Split and Glass, and Old, and now this, I think it's just he's done a really good thing, I think, and just kind of like, this is also notably a screenplay which he shares co-writing credit on, which he doesn't normally have a lot of that. The last one actually was After Earth. So I think that's something maybe this movie may benefit from. But I don't know. I just think he's on a good run. I really like that he's been a lot more consistent with his movies. And it's crazy to think about how successful his movies have been in those last 5 that I mentioned, because, he's making a lot of these movies in some ways with his own money, or with money that's coming through co-financing that he's kind of setting up, or through studios, like initially, like with Blumhouse, with The Visit, where they're kind of like a 5 million or less type thing. But I think all of the movies, have made at least like $90 million, worldwide. Wow. So I'm talking just about since The Visit, and that's a movie that was made for $5 million. But, Split was huge, over 270, Glass was huge, over 270, even Old made over $90 million, which is kind of surprises me. So I don't know. I think it's cool that he's kind of like reined it in a little bit and really gotten back to some really good storytelling, really good filmmaking. I think he's I've always really liked him as a filmmaker. I'm really kind of struck by the way he shoots a lot of his movies or even shows that he's been involved in.
Yeah.
Like Servant, and, he had a hand in Wayward Pines, which I really liked the first season of that. But I'm just excited, man, because I've always really, really loved M. Night. And I mean, in his earlier work, I was a super fan and probably bought into the whole he's the next Spielberg thing a little too much. But for the most part, I like the vast majority of his movies, if not love them. And I just feel like this is another one of these recent ones. I like this. I personally like this more than Old quite a bit, but I still liked Old. Yeah. I just think this one, the performances are more balanced, they're more even. And the story is just more interesting to me. And I think it just works overall better because of the performances. But
well, there's a what would you do aspect to it because of those performances, but it's not really a what would you do, because you're like, well, I don't really think that I would be. I mean, Ronald, you and I were texting about this. I don't think I would be swayed. I would be the skeptical dad. I would be like, I don't know. You could show me all the footage, and I'd be like, you could fake that. I have to hold on to my sanity. I have to hold on to my sense of direction about what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to save my family. I'm trying to protect my family. Whatever. I wouldn't be able to. Oh, you're trying to break my reality. I know I'm not going to let you break my reality. I might later, then as I said to Ronald, be like, oh shit, if something's really happening here. But I think what's interesting about that couple thing, and I don't know if we mentioned Ben Aldridge, the guy who plays Daddy Andrew. I mean, honestly, this is kind of his movie. I went into it thinking it was going to be Bautista's movie, and it almost is. But I think that the Ben Aldridge guy who plays Andrew really does he carries so many scenes, and maybe because I don't have any preconceived notion of that actor that I know of. It allowed me to just really be like, this guy. I like this guy. I like Andrew, even though, I know it's just a performance, but I thought he really kind of pushed through. And I felt like that groundedness of a person who's sort of denying the scenario, it makes it, whatever crazy stuff is going on, feel that much more relatable. So there is that little bit of a what would you do, but I was like, when it was over, the one thing it wasn't making me do, Steve, was kind of wonder about it. But then I had a conversation with my son, and because he saw it with us, and I secretly brought a grown man. I snuck in a grown man pretending he was my son. You guys haven't seen Henry in 3 years, but he's almost as tall as me now. And he brought up something that made me realize, oh yeah, that's the sort of thing. That's the thing that got me wondering. And then it got me into that zone you're in, Steve, where I couldn't stop thinking about it, which is if this is something that happens and it's been repeated before, in the past, did it not go as far as it did this time? Yeah. Because people did the thing sooner. I know that's like, in the past, did it go differently because people didn't need 3 steps in front of them to do the thing?
People just believed.
People just believed.
We do have a documented version of when the one of the times it happened.
Right. But I mean, it makes you think about all the stuff like the disasters, the whatever, the pandemics, the things. Yeah. So I was like, oh, how many times has it happened already? Is that little M. Night Shyamalan kind of twist of saying like, now think back on all these things that have happened and realize that when that was happening, something was happening behind the scenes. The other thing I heard someone say that was so interesting was that we're right now is so fractured as a country, and sometimes even as families, and sometimes even as like two people sitting in a room talking, we have this moment. It's like this closed world of this cabin. There's like two total different realities, two people who cannot have a real conversation, two groups that cannot have a real exchange because what they believe and what they value is so fundamentally different for this situation that there's no getting past it. And so in that sense, it's almost a really cynical view of like, this is the shape humanity is in. As well as the broader picture and the kind of fantasy or whatever you want to call it, element, mythological element that the movie kind of gets into. But all of it done, you're right, Steve, it's very sure-handed. This movie is just, I mean, I think M. Night, I mean, that next Spielberg thing, the next Spielberg thing, it really did kind of hurt him in a way, because if he started to believe it, that's when he started making his most pretentious movies. But I think, he seems to not that you want someone to be like, oh, he's been humbled and he's back, but like, I think he knows how to do that lower budget thing. Maybe it is his own money, whatever it is, but he seems to have these ideas that are scalable to what he can pull off. And we've talked about this after the screening. This movie comes in at like a clean hour and 40 minutes. It's not trying to overstay its welcome. It's not trying to be ostentatious. He kind of wants to be in and out and leave you gasping a little bit. So I think there's something energized about him. I feel like right now he's more in my mind, like he's more like, oh, he could be the next Jordan Peele because he's a guy who does these fantasy horror, whatever films, but he always has a little something maybe philosophical or spiritual or whatever you want to call it that he's actually talking about. And it reminds me of that. Like this is a home invasion with a difference. Well, Jordan Peele makes an alien invasion with a difference, or a horror film with a difference. So I think that, it's that with a difference that these guys can kind of bring to it. And you might think M. Night is hokey, but we were talking about this too. I just now know people are going to act and talk like they don't act in real life in an M. Night movie. And I'm just that's just part of the style, and I'm going to enjoy that as much as I enjoy people in a Coen Brothers movie talking in a kind of, whatever, fast talking, old timey way or whatever. So
for sure, man.
I also appreciate how like this is in talking about those 5 movies or these 5 films, and if you remove Split and Glass, which we would all learn to be a part of this Unbreakable trilogy, which by the way, that seeing Split in a theater and like that reveal in that, it's still that's still like one of those moments for me in a theater kind of thing. But if you think of the Village, Old, and Cabin at the Knock at the Cabin, it's like these 3 like family trips gone horribly wrong. and they're very like contained in one space, or a relatively small space, and that probably plays into the ability to kind of do these films on a budget where they can really get a good return. And also just to note, I don't know what Universal does with the release for this, but I mean, he's one of the few filmmakers out there still that really demands a theatrical window. So I'm curious what happens with this in terms of their 17-day play that they can do depending on how this movie performs. Because even with Old had some legs and did well, like I just mentioned, at the box office, but Old, I think they protected that film for 90 days before it came out. So I'm curious what happens. He's one of few that still kind of make that a requirement of what he puts out. And in this new time that we're in, I'm curious to see if people will have the opportunity to see this sooner than later, or if they have to wait that standard window. But again, I the more it's just me, the more I really, really enjoyed this movie. And I highly recommend checking it out if you're an M. Night fan, or Batista. Again, he's great in it, or just kind of looking for a tight little thriller.
Or if you're enjoying watching Rupert Grint's post Harry Potter career, where he just plays like really uncomfortable people.
The opposite of Ron Weasley.
Yeah, right. Anything else?
What else did you guys see? You two saw something, right?
We saw Babylon.
You saw Babylon?
Yeah.
All 3 hours and 9 minutes of it.
I can't wait to hear Ronald talk about this, because he was kind of getting into it after the screening of Knock at the Cabin, but it was kind of cut short.
Yeah.
Tell me about Babylon.
It's crazy. It's one of the wackiest movies I've ever seen. I mean, somebody gets peed on in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
I think you're burying the lead. Somebody gets elephant diarrhea all over themselves in the first 20 seconds of the movie. Before you get peed on, you get elephant diarrhea.
So you're just seeing a lot of
Lots of it.
waste on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I
Had
don't
you
think there's
said that
any.
to me on had you said that to me on Tuesday, then I probably would have made time to watch this
It's like,
movie.
well,
If I knew elephant diarrhea was involved.
I mean, but we're not talking about a quick blast, Steve. We're talking
No,
about a
it's like-
shower and a camera. It gets on the camera lens.
yeah.
But there's a surprisingly low. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, Ronald. There's not much semen in this movie. There's blood.
No.
There's vomit. There's pee and poo.
I'm out.
But there's not like you'd think that
it's not
Damien
his
Chazelle
movie.
would have thrown in a scene of but I'm just saying with this
Yeah.
movie being the movie that it is, you'd think they would have given us one scene. There's even like lots of snot. There's a guy hawking loogies through a whole scene.
Yeah.
I don't know. This movie is one of those that I think is just going to always be confounding to me because I found it in some places so interesting and like exhilarating, and it's got that. I think Damien Chazelle's really going for it with the kind of not quite Scorsese-esque, but like those kind of sequences and camera moves and big epic, just long shots that move through the set where millions of things are happening. And I think that at its best, La La Land had that energy of someone who was really working the camera and working the sequences. And even Whiplash, had a giddiness to it, an exhilarated quality to it. So I think there's something he does that is, I mean, despite the fact that this movie is going to give you like Southland Tales vibes in terms of like everything it tries to do, it's also got those moments. And I think that like there's a moment at the end or very near the end, maybe the very ending, actually, I'm thinking of, that really did make me go, okay, this movie has hit me in the feels. As a movie lover, this movie will grab you at certain moments when it makes you think about the movie business and the sort of people that make it and so forth. But it also has moments where it feels a little bit high on its own fumes when it comes to the conversations about movies and stuff. And I like the way it pulled from lore, and some of this stuff is like crazy as hell, but it's based on stuff that really did happen that's very close to events of the movie, even though these are fictionalized characters at the center of the movie. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's almost no way for me to have a clean opinion on this movie. I can't be clean because I've got elephant diarrhea all over my body from the first moment of this movie. It's just do you know what I mean, Ronald, though? I mean, you can't be like, they didn't try.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, they really missed the mark. It's like, well, they tried to hit like 70 different targets somehow in this movie. And I don't even know what happened then.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Because at first you're like, okay, this is chaotic. Then you're like, okay, all that they're addressing how women felt in this scenario. Then they're like, okay, well, this black dude's having a pretty good run right now. Oh, okay, his fate has changed a little bit.
Right.
It's like they really do address all facets of it. But there's a movie that I dare you to watch that counters this in every way, shape, or form, and that's The Artist. It addresses all of the things about the industry changing that this addresses in a way that feels a lot more calculated and streamlined and better told story.
But that's a totally different beast. It's like it's a wholesome movie compared to this movie, which is trying to make you realize how hedonistic and lawless it all was. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I think that that's almost like this movie's not trying to be.
Oh no.
Trying to be the movie that The Artist was. It almost feels like Damien Chazelle's trying to burn bridges. Like he wants nobody to want to make a movie with him after this.
Yeah. He's
so cynical about the movie biz. But in the end, I think it is still a love letter. I mean, the very end is very like the power of movies to kind of brighten your day. And it reminds me of that moment. Remember the moment in the theater where it looks like Ryan Gosling has been stood up in La La Land, and then she shows up, and how that moment is just such a big emotional burst of just joy. This movie, that moment in the theater where the camera moves up, Ronald, and you see everybody in the crowd. I thought that was actually like corny as hell, but also like really effective in its way. And then it does a very strange thing. There's a montage that I really was shocked to see, as far as like what's in the montage. It's just It seems like this movie doesn't have rails. It's a train with no rails.
It really is. It really is off the rails, but it really pays homage to the people that made things happen. Not just the director, not just the actors, the extras, the people that really wanted to be stars, and what it meant in Hollywood to come and be on a marquee and be on a poster, and it was like this seeing Samara Weaving and
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie in the same frame
Yeah.
felt like the screen was going to crack in half.
I know.
Like I'd never imagined those two ever being in anything together ever. But it was just
Together
a real, ever. But it was really a well-made piece of trash. It's a trash. It's a dumpster fire.
It's a gaudy dumpster fire that is like really like well made. You're right.
Yeah,
like, that's a good.
You should absolutely see it though. Like here's what's crazy. I never thought I'd say this about a dumpster fire. I'll probably watch this movie 2 or 3 more times.
Wow.
And it's 3 hours long. Like it is something about it. It's hitting on something that, yeah, like so there's a character that's kind of in the beginnings of the movie that comes back much later, and when he's in the theater and the montage happens, right?
Yeah.
That when he's crying in the theater, there's something about the way that movies make us feel.
Yeah.
That I could that is like, oh, Damien Chazelle, this is what makes him great. It's like through all of this dumpster fire, there's still like John said, some really golden moments that I'll never forget. You know,
okay. Golden showers to be exact.
Golden, like that was another thing. She peed on him for like 30 seconds. It wasn't like just a pee and then go to the next scene. It was like, did she really pee on him? I don't know, man.
I mean, I'm sure they didn't really do that, but it's like you never know. I do think the movie starts with all that stuff to establish what we're trying to say, which is this movie is wild in that way. Yeah. No, I thought it was, like it was weird. I kind of agree with you for a movie that's way too long and way too meandering and way too like in love with itself. It was weirdly watchable, and partially that's because of that Damien Chazelle, that sense of like cinema that he has, and I really do believe he's a guy that can make maybe some amazing movies that don't have all these qualifiers attached to it. Like this movie's kind of amazing, but amazing in the way that like it would be amazing if you were at the fair and the Ferris wheel broke off and rolled into a lake. That would be amazing. Yes. It just wouldn't be you'd feel like, well, I got to make sure everybody made it out okay before I say it was amazing. But to have seen that would be awe-inspiring, and that's kind of what this movie feels like. Is just it's wild, and it is about that same thing though. It's about excess, so it's I don't know. It's almost like it's got a get out of jail free card when it comes to that. The performances are interesting. Who do you think stood out, Ronald, as like a maybe the best actor or
Margot Robbie's killing it. Brad Pitt is like this like Peter Pan kind of character, man. Like. And his arc is so like troubling. Yeah. The actress, the Asian actress
who plays Fei Zhu.
Oh my God, man.
She was great.
She was great. Margot Robbie, of course.
I think she's the one with the most to do. That actor who plays Manny, I don't know his name.
Manny's really good. Yeah.
What's the name of the guy? I think I can see it here. Manny's Diego Calva, and he's really good. I mean, he's honestly great. Like he actually holds the thing together pretty darn well, and you almost forget that he's doing such a solid acting job. Whose part I actually enjoyed, and I thought the vignette that he was in was actually very funny, but I thought Rory Scovel was really fun to see in this, and that whole thing with Tobey Maguire. I mean, what is that scene? That's the
I don't understand.
But that was fun. I mean, that was like a great example of where this movie can go. Just and you're like, what are we watching? Like this is a little 30-minute horror film that's wedged into this this movie.
Flea? Was that Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Yep.
Also super random, and I kind of liked his role. His voice is so like.
No, he was great. He was great. Olivia Wilde is in it. You blink and you miss her, but she's really good. Chloe Fineman from SNL was in one scene, which is that thing where you go, is that Chloe Fineman? And then the scene's over, and then you look it up, and you're like, yeah, it was, but I don't know, how they do that. But I think that's a Damien Chazelle thing. He's not quite Rian Johnson level, but he's like at the point where he can get people to pop in for a small part where you might not know that it's them. or where if they get a good scene, it's worth it to come in. So yeah, I mean, Steve, I can't imagine quite what you're going to think. I feel like there's so many elements of this movie that feel like they'd be a home run for you, but then I think there's a lot that is like, I know, anathema for you. So I'm interested to know if you ever sat through this movie, if there would be moments that you would like carry off and say this was great, or if it would just be too much of a mess for you to hang in there with, because it's not like it's artsy. It's not like it's in love with itself and nothing's going on. It's like there's too much going on. You know, it's a different kind of overlong. So I really am I kind of want you to see it just so we can have a full accounting of Babylon. But I don't really wish it on anybody. But like I said, I found it watchable, and I do think Damien Chazelle. I didn't watch First Man or whatever that astronaut movie was that he did. And I kind of am on board with him. I'm one of those people that liked La La Land and didn't feel bad about it the next morning. So I think, and a lot of people seem to have turned on Whiplash, and I've seen people acting like it furthers the idea of like a toxic mentor or something. But I don't think that movie leaves you feeling like J.K. Simmons is a great guy at all. It just leaves you feeling like maybe that kind of person can pull something from you that you wouldn't find otherwise. But I don't remember ending that movie feeling like, oh, this is a worship piece for this for this kind of mentor. But I think Damien Chazelle's always going to maybe do that. He's going to have something in his movies that are going to be somewhat divisive or, off-putting to some, because there's something going on in there. Anyway, as a Brad Pitt fan, you have to watch it, right, Steve?
Yeah, I'm completist. Yeah, I got to check it out.
Yeah.
I'll watch it. I'll let you guys know. One thing I watched, I'm very late to, that I wanted to mention just on the podcast, because I love pretty much everyone involved with it. But I finally got around to watching the FX docuseries Welcome to Wrexham.
Mm-hmm.
The Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds basically bought a Welsh football club, and it's basically about how they're basically taking the Wrexham team, trying to get them promoted through the course of a season, and basically spinning this out into some sort of big business investment venture. Really interesting, just as an idea for anything. And the series is incredible, though. Like, I had no idea. I mean, like, we talked about this before. Like, I just feel like I was in with Rob's involvement, because I just think that he does really have something special going on. Like, whether it was Always Sunny or now that he has the Mythic Quest show on Apple TV. And this is another one that I just think that there's a lot of really great, the story of this football club and the town around it and the people that kind of prop it up and keep it alive is just, I thought, was incredible. And I think someone like him and Ryan Reynolds, who wherever you fall in Ryan Reynolds, like, I'm a fan, and I think that he brings a lot to this docuseries and to this whole adventure, just as a marketing kind of genius in a lot of ways, and all the stuff he has going on with Mint and Aviation Gin and just his film career. But it's just a really great series. I mean, if you can watch it, it's on FX. It's, I think they're about 25 minutes each. I think there was like 16 episodes or 17 episodes. But you can watch the whole season. I think they're gonna, I think there's gonna be another season.
It's been very well received, I think. So
yeah, it was just
surprised.
I like plowed through it in 2 days. Like, I was just like, wow, I was hooked. And not even knowing anything about football or soccer, and kind of in that part of the world, and really everywhere but here, where it's like just like the one of, if not the biggest sport in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It really was like a great education for me too, and they have so much fun kind of using the show to do that, to educate an audience about the sport and the club, and just the hierarchy of the system and the promotion and the demotions and everything like that, the relegation. It's just, I loved it, and I've been telling people about it all week at work and everything. So I wanted to mention it on the pod. Did either of you watch that, or you know what I'm talking about?
Man.
Okay.
I told you about it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the
show.
podcast. We talked about it on the podcast. This was the whole conversation with McElhenney and like my feeling about him.
I've watched it twice already.
I hadn't gotten to it yet, and it just was sitting there waiting for me.
I need to watch it once.
I'm glad you like it, man.
I more than liked it. I loved it. It was incredible experience watching it, and
yeah,
I'm all in. I got to order a Wrexham jersey. I'm all in on this club.
I want one so bad with the TikTok logo on it.
I want that hat that he has. I like that
the,
that black.
the Philly one.
Yeah.
The Philly colorway.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
There's a soccer doc, The War for Football, that's about the Super League that's about to that they're trying to create.
Yeah.
That is a perfect companion piece for that. It's
what is it called? The Wharf of what?
The War for Football.
Oh, the War for Football.
The War for Football. Yeah, it's
the Wharf of Football.
The War for Football.
That's what I thought he said.
No, the War for
It's
football.
all happening on like down
Super
at the
League.
docks. Yeah,
it's about all this really, especially when you see it happen on Wrexham, like just the idea that like poorer teams can't do some of the things that the super teams can do, you know, so like any of the big ones you've ever heard of, you know, so like seeing all of those rich teams kind of come together and create a super league so that basically nobody profits but them. Is insane. But they mention Wrexham because that's like one of the examples. Yeah, I know one person on earth from Wrexham, and she's very happy that the show is kind of being. It's like nobody ever talks about my town. I used to work with her at Under Armour, but yeah, I'm really happy that you saw. I was just saying, I was just being
no, we talked about it a few times and it just kind of got pushed off, and I've been trying to go back, and I've been checking off these shows over the last year that I missed, but and I had even heard him on a couple of podcasts, Rob, talking about the development of the show and just of their investment in the team, and like it's so interesting how they're using the show to fund the team, and
so smart,
and FX's involvement in terms of the marketing for the show, which is really marketing for the team, and like just this like layered system of like revenue streaming that they're able to do, and with Ryan's companies and his brand. I don't know. It's just a really creative, unique idea for investment, for a show, for any of this stuff. But at the center of it, just this football club and like the town is just like you can't not watch the show and fall in love with it. It's just like it's engaging as all hell.
Super lovable people, man.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the relationship between Robin and Ryan. I don't know why I couldn't remember Ryan. Between Rob and Ryan and Rob's like shock of some of the things that Ryan can do. Just he's like us. He's like he's processing things the way that we are processing things. It's like, what you leveraging? What you doing? What? Okay, I guess TikTok is a part of this. What?
Right.
Like it's just super smart stuff that he does. He's a mogul. I can actually use that term for him. He's a mogul. And I think he's turning Rob into one. I think he's turning Rob. He's getting Rob's brain churning about the business of it all.
And the art of mogulism.
The art of mogulism.
Well, I just love how like Humphrey, you know, the guy who is kind of their conduit between the team, is like a writer from Mythic Quest.
Yeah.
You know? It's like that's how he even learned about this club, you know, and the whole you know, the football system, and like it's just a writer's room conversation turns into an investment, and turns into buying a football club, turns into your next television series. It's I don't know, it's just kind of bonkers.
It's real life Ted Lasso. Like
it is. It genuinely is. Totally, that's what it is.
Insane. Like the way that they like the Deadpool masks, oh god, man.
It's good. I loved it. I can't wait to see more.
I'm really glad you liked it.
What else did you guys see? Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
I think so. Have you seen anything? I think that's it for me. I think that might be it for me.
I mean, I mentioned to you guys I saw Infinity Pool, the Brandon Cronenberg movie. Yeah. No, I texted you guys about it.
Yeah, he said it on the thread. Yeah.
But those things pass by. Ronald and I were talking about how when you come in and there's been several messages, sometimes you're like, you know what? I'll just figure it out if anything really important got said.
Or it'll get brought up on the pod.
Yeah, it'll come up. But no, I mean, I don't know. Did you watch Possessor, Ronald? Did you see the last Cronenberg joint?
No, I thought that the last Cronenberg thing was that body horror movie. No, is that in my brain?
You might be thinking of David Cronenberg.
David Cronenberg.
This is his son, Brandon Cronenberg, the guy who made Possessor and I did not see
So
his
both
other.
of them are sick fucks.
Brandon Cronenberg, it's one of those things where you say his dad must be proud. Like when you watch
Okay.
Infinity Pool, you say to yourself, his dad must be proud. But also, Infinity Pool fits into the category of, rich assholes at some kind of resort. Having some fucked up stuff happen to them. And I think Infinity Pool takes it to this extra layer of being like, it's just so creepy and off-putting from the start. Like even the way the camera moves in a scene and what it chooses to frame up and how it can avoid you from really having seen a person's face. Like it can create mystery in interesting ways because you realize, oh, I only saw that character kind of from the side or from the back, or I don't really know what they look like, or I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, not to say that there's mistaken identity as a part of the movie. It's just, I've always thought about that when you go see a movie, like how movies favor the face of the actor and like the framed up nice shot of the actor. But when sometimes a movie finds interesting ways to look at a scene where you're not always framed up on faces and you're not always seeing the thing that makes the scene make the most sense to you, that can be done in an artful way, or it can be done in a really haphazard way. And in this case, I really feel like he's got an eye for how to be intriguing and weird and dreamlike and interesting, and yet also give you a storyline that you can follow. Kind of one of those stories that's so weird that you realize, oh, I didn't think I understood it, but now I think I actually do understand it, and it's just that weird. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I would say the best reference point would be something like, if you liked Possessor, then maybe this is like a follow-up that feels like it's of a piece with it, but it also is a much, like this resort is like in a vaguely like maybe like Eastern European country, and outside the walls of the resort they're told not to leave the resort because it's really dangerous out there, and the local cops might really not cooperate with you if you get caught out there at night or whatever. So it's like there's this feeling of complete danger all around, and you're in this weird resort where everything is supposed to be so nice, but it never feels that fun. It's not like White Lotus. It's like the whole place feels kind of creepy and austere and just off-putting from the start. And then what happens overnight, Alexander Skarsgård is a writer who's kind of gone to this retreat to sort of get his creative juices flowing. And Mia Goth is a person who seems to be a big fan of his book, and then she kind of pulls him into this whole plot and this story that unfolds. And yes, Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård are our two prime actors for, like, they seem to like ask their agent, like, well, is the script, is it fucked up? Is there weird sex stuff in it? Yes. That I don't have to read it. I just have to know that it's going to be off-putting and weird. And yeah, they go to those extremes, and I think that's part of it. I mean, it's like Cronenberg, Skarsgård, Goth, all together. There's a lot of willingness to explore and do wild stuff in this movie. So yeah, I think I kind of loved it in a way, but I also can totally get how some people would, run screaming in the other direction.
Oh. I'll probably watch it when it comes on PVOD or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Yeah, I heard somebody reviewing it the other day that it kind of framed it. I mean, similar to how you just said, but like they were talking about how it was more, or to them it felt like in some ways like what The Purge could have been if it was like a lot more just fucked up, and like people really went into a lot, like this idea of like dark places and what kind of person are you, or could you be if you had money to like basically cover your the things that you really want to do but don't do because you're not supposed to. Like, and the way they were reviewing it was like, oh, this sounds a lot more interesting to me than the trailer looked.
Well,
to me.
and the horror, sci-fi, whatever element of it that kind of brings into that is something that really is explored in the movie too. It's not just weird imagery for the sake of weird imagery. So you do get another layer, but that whole idea of like, is your life like you've got enough money for for people's lives not to mean as much to you. Right. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really, it does kind of look into that. And the Alexander Skarsgård character is kind of like, he's a creative person with a rich wife. So he's kind of like an outsider amongst these super rich elite people, which makes him kind of a poser. And then kind of like how he plays, it's almost like the Harry Caul thing from the conversation of like, when he does kind of start to feel full of himself and get into it is when you can totally see like, oh, he's slipping. Like this guy is believing his own hype in a way. But yeah, it's and then it's also completely horrific, and it has elements of body horror and like a super long orgy scene that a lot of people find I've seen what's funny is I've seen people saying this orgy scene is so tame. I can't believe this movie has such like puritanical ideas about sex, and other people saying like I nearly threw up and left the theater because of how weird this orgy scene was. So I don't know.
Oh, wow.
It's just that kind of guy. I mean, it's like that's why I say Possessor would be the best style guide, because that movie has some really weird moments of ultra violence in it that make it body horror. When you get that much into like how destructive you can be towards the human body. It's right. I think Nicholas Winding Refn is another person who kind of treats violence in a similar way, where he just lets you see the ruin of it.
I'm excited about his show. I haven't even started on it yet.
Oh yeah,
Copenhagen Cowboy. Haven't even started. It's a crazy name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next week we've got GhostWatch.
Yeah, saying GhostWatch. There it is. You got it. And remember, it's on Tubi if you want to watch it for free.
GhostWatch, hun.
GhostWatch, hun. Movieshmovie.com is the website. You can find all of our episodes there, all 366 plus episodes. Also, you can jump onto the socials from there: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. YouTube.com/Movieshmovie podcast if you want to watch the video version of this podcast. If you subscribe on a podcast platform of your choice, please, if you can, leave a review, a rating, or hit the share button. Do any of the above. It would really be helpful.
Yeah.
And we would really appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. So next week we got GhostWatch and some other stuff that I'm sure will come up between now and then that we'll happily talk about look forward to that. All right, guys. Good seeing you both. And thank you again for listening, whoever you are that is listening and or watching on YouTube. And as always, you made our day. Thanks.
Bye.